Hey folks, Matt Sharp here with another Pacific Angler video. We're filming from the side of the river. You don't usually see me out on the water, but I wanted to take a moment and walk you all through what I carry when I'm out trout fishing around British Columbia. Now, I look like a porcupine on the river as I do carry multiple setups, but I carry these multiple setups for specific fishing situations. Now, you don't have to carry this many rods, but I wanted to walk you through what rods I carry, why I carry, and how I fish them. And then we'll do a little bit of a bag dump to take a look at all the toys that I carry with me to cover the different fishing scenarios. So as always, you want to see more videos like this, consider hitting the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let's get into it. Okay, so what do we got here? Well, when I am out, I sometimes go really simple. I love carrying just one rod and not being encumbered by a bunch of stuff. But let's say I'm on a river for the first time of the season, or I'm going to a new spot and I don't know what I'm going to see. I really like to have specific setups for each of the scenarios. The three basic ways we present food to a fish, which is going to be dry fly fishing, nymphing, and swung fly or cast and strip techniques. Now, we're gonna look at all those in detail in the back end of this video, but let's look at the setups first. So first off, let's start off with the fun one, and that is dry fly fishing. So this guy right here, if I can get it out, this is my Sage Core R8 390. So it's a 3-weight 9-foot. Some people will go shorter. Got a nice little old Islander reel on it. And then I'm gonna have a fly line that is designed for a gentle presentation, not a heavy, clunky line. I'm gonna run a 9-foot tapered leader, 5X tippet, super simple, and then we've got our dry fly. So this is my happy spot. This is one of the funnest rods to fish. And if you're just gonna have one and fish the trout streams, something like this is ideal. Now, sometimes though, the fish aren't gonna come to the surface. And you're looking for a hatch, you're hoping that the fish are gonna be looking up, but it doesn't always happen. And for that, I break out my nymphing rig. And this guy here is a 496, so it's a 4-weight, it's 9.5 feet long. That gives me a little bit more reach so I can get up and do the mends that I want to do. And it's going to have a slightly chunkier fly line on it, something that's going to be able to turn over the indicators a little bit nicer. And you can see here I've got my Oros indicators. I love these things. They're relatively new, but they're really great because they don't get line tangled. The way they attach to the leader doesn't mess it up, so I highly recommend them. We're gonna then run a custom leader on this one that is thick and gets really skinny quickly. And then we're gonna go down to a split shot, a swivel or a tippet ring, and then we're gonna have 18 inches of 5X or 4X fluorocarbon. And then we've got our nymph. And right now I'm running a sort of a Paragon balance style, we'll call it a mayfly. So what's next? Well, there's another way to nymph, and it is extremely effective when you have water that's quite small. And this is when Eurofishing comes in. And love it or hate it, it is a really cool way to cover a perfect drift. And this is an interesting setup. This is the Sage ESN, and this is the 3-weight 10-foot 6, and it doesn't have a fly line on it. It's got a mono rig on it. So literally this is Maxima Chameleon, and that's all we're going to need on this because we're going to be flipping this upstream and holding at the perfect depth as we follow it down. It's really great for small water, and it is a more effective drift than our indicator setup. The only drawback is you can't cover as much water on the river. So that's this guy. We'll show you guys and girls how to do that. Last but not least, I have one of my favorite rods. As you guys know, I've been a steelhead guide for a long time, and the Swung Fly or streamer fishing is a super fun way to cover a river, very good for scouting. I've got an ancient reel on it. This is a 1935 Hardy Perfect, and we have a sink tip line on this. This is an older Sage. This is one of my favorites. This is the XP, and it's in a 6-weight. So it's got a little more punch to it. I can throw a little bit bigger flies and hopefully catch slightly larger fish. We're gonna use a short leader. This breast to hand of 8-pound is sort of perfect for this. And then we're gonna be tied off to a streamer, and I've got the classic egg sucking leech on here. which covers a lot of different species, different kinds of water. And we're going to show you guys how to fish that. So that's my basic setup. Those are all the rods that I carry. Now, a lot of you might be looking at this and going, good God, do I need to carry 4 or 5 rods? And you don't. There's a couple simple ways that I'm going to talk through at the end of this, how you can take one rod and tweak it so you can do all these different presentations with just having one rod and not having to walk around looking like a porcupine on the river. But let's take a look in the bag quick, see what else I carry, because there's some key stuff there. It's not that complicated, but let's take a peek. So net, definitely have a net. You're going to, even small fish, it's going to make landing way easier and you're going to lose less flies snapping fish off. This is the fish pond release system and I love it. It is very easy, just sticks on the back. It's magnetic. It's held up for me for the last 4 or 5 seasons really well. I throw a thermometer on as well because I like to take water temperatures. That helps me gauge when we're going to see hatches. And then I put it on the net so I remember to use it. I can just dip the net in the water so I don't get my hands cold. Water bottle, that's pretty straightforward stuff. But what have I got? We'll go to the top here really quick. Out my wallet, you don't have to worry about that. This is my little nymphing rig setup. And this has everything I need in it to set up these nymphing rigs really quick. So I've got a couple sizes of split shot, I've got some tippet rings, and I got some indicators. It's all you need, but I usually have that in my top pocket when I'm out nymphing, so I can make quick changes. What else have we got? Sunscreen stick. This is great so you can quickly apply. I'm very pale skinned so the sun bites me. And then these guys, I've talked about these before. These are Whizzy wipes. They're awesome. You don't want to carry toilet paper. It's basically a puck that you dip some water on. It opens up into a towel that you can use for personal hygiene or wiping down your hands, or just having an option to clean up is nice when you're out on the river without having to pack toilet paper or bags of wet wipes. That's the top. I got some snacks in here. That's pretty straightforward stuff, but let's get into the meat here. So I got my tippet stack. Now this is excessive. There's way too much on here, but you're gonna wanna have 5X mono for your dry fly fishing, and you're gonna want 5X, 4X fluoro for your nymphing fishing. And then you might want something a little heavier in case you need to build a leader. So something in that 3X, 2X range for the streamer fishing, as well as building out a leader if your leader gets completely beat up and you need to make a change midday. Then we've got my leader pouch. So this guy has a bunch of leaders in it. Again, for your dry fly, a tapered 5X leader is perfect. You might have some custom nymphing leaders put in here and you're ready for that. And I always carry a backup jacket. Simple, straightforward. The mosquitoes come out, I can put that on, or it gets cold in the afternoon, I can put that on. And then I got 2, if not 3 fly boxes. I'm not gonna go into detail on these. I carry way too many flies. It's why I carry a backpack, but I've got dry flies, nymphs, and some streamers. Now we're covered and we can hit the water. So let's take a quick look at these presentations. We're gonna show you a little bit of how we do each of the different setups. Okay, so obviously one of the coolest things you can do with a fly rod is throw a dry fly and see that fish come flying out of the water to eat it. Very simple setup. This is probably the simplest setup. Probably one of the easiest to fish as well. So we've got our floating line, our 9-foot tapered leader. One thing you gotta have if you're dry fly fishing is you've gotta have floating. This is gink, it's classic. I actually recommend if you get into this to carry gink and a powder floating, because the powder floating can actually revive the fly a little bit better. It sucks some of the moisture out. But even before you start fishing, you're gonna apply some floating. You don't need to do it very heavy. We're just gonna give this like a slight gelling job. So I'll get some on my finger here. Just a little dab is enough. And then I'm gonna work it in to all the areas. If this is a really small dry fly, I'm only gonna put a very little bit amount on it because it adds weight, because it's liquid. But with a big fly like this, I can be a little bit liberal, get it all in there. Now, I don't touch my leader in the first 3 or 4 feet of the leader because I actually want that leader to sink. I don't want to leave a squiggly line, but I will take the rest of my fingers, or the grease on my fingers, and I'll hit my line a little bit. It allows you to mend, allows you to get that line off the water a little bit easier. And we should be good. We got a debarbed hook. Let's go see if we can rise one of these fish. We've been seeing one rise. We're still before the hatch, but we might be able to get a pop up in this heavy water at the top. When we're dry fly fishing, there's 2 sort of styles. The Conventional wisdom is you want to be working up because the first thing the fish is going to see is a perfect presented fly, not a swinging fly. However, I tend to come at it from a steelhead background. It just feels more natural for me to go top to bottom. And so depending on where I'm going, how I'm doing it, I'll usually start at the top and go down, though I totally understand that going from the bottom up is going to give you a slightly different presentation. Always look at the light, always look at your angles, but I'm going to try at the top here and work my way in. So I'm going to pull out the right amount of line. Again, I'm going to start short. We're just going to throw a nice little short guy here, 45 degrees upstream. Go high rod with it, and we're going to just try to get this thing to float as though it's not attached to a line. So when we're doing an upstream presentation, about at the 45, we're going to have to downstream in, and then we're going to do those dump mends again. I'm just seeing if there's anyone home. My fly sunk there, let it swing in, get a little more line, move a little bit farther into the run. So I'm going to do quite a few false casts with my dry fly because it's going to help dry it off. Anytime you get a fish, whipping it back and forth on a bunch of false casts is key. And a few false casts every cast helps it dry out. There's my mend. And now I'm going to dump some line to it, dump some line to it, dump some line to it. Pull off a little more. I saw that rise in the middle of this fast stuff. So we might have to stretch out a little bit more to get one to go. No, he didn't want that one. Thought we'd get a bump there. And there's my mend. Oh, dry fly sunk a bit there. Pop back up. Dump mend. Dump mend. Come on, get a bite. Still early for this. I like doing this more in the evenings. But sometimes you can get a fish prospecting like this in the morning. I think one just came up and looked at it there. So a couple things to look for when you're gauging if you're getting a good drift. When you mend, you're going to pop that dry fly usually. You want to mend the least amount possible to correct the line so you don't get draggy. See here, I'm not mending at all. I'm actually waiting it out, moving my rod here to extend that drift. Now here I have to mend, and I'm going to pop that. I don't want to put that mend in water where I think the fish is. So if I see a riser up here, I'm going to position him probably in about that zone is where my sweet drift is. I don't want a riser right now to be right here because I know I'm going to have to make a mend right in that zone and drag and jerk my dry fly. So try to position, you'll have sort of a window here that's a good drift and a window here that's a good drift. And if you see a rising fish and you're targeting him, you want to put him in that zone so you're getting the perfect drift for it. And we're just going to move that zone through the river to cover the whole run. I'm going to go a little higher here. I think maybe I missed it. Try again. So I'm going to do some false cast, dry this fly off a bit. Another thing, false cast this way so you're not false casting over the water that you're going to be fishing. And now we pivot it to where we're going to be fishing. So I'm extending that. I'm not doing a mend because I know that's a sweet spot. Now I have to mend. Up it comes. And I'm back in the sweet spot there. Little dump, and that's about as far as I can cover with a dry fly just because of the distance of seeing the fly. But it looks like there wasn't one there. I'll fish this down a bit now. I'm going to start moving down and working through, see if we can drum one up. Working short, working medium, working long, covering all the drifts I can. Once I get it, I start short, medium, long, and then I sort of move short, medium, long, move short, medium, long. There's a bit of a nuance to it. You'll sort of see the line or get an idea of where the fish are holding, and you'll be able to sort of dial in on that zone for depth out into the river. But when you don't know, start short, medium, long, and then work your way through it. Again, doing the dump mend load, we load it, we fire it, we load it, we fire it. And then you can let that fly swing at the end. It is very common you'll get the smaller aggressive fish to eat on the swing at the end, so don't forget that. A lot of times I'll be talking or walking or moving, we'll get a take right at the end. Don't usually tend to be the biggest fish. The biggest fish like that perfect drift, but they're still fun when you can pull on one. Come on, get me an eat. So we didn't get one there, but what happens when you do get a rise? Well, with this technique, just like the indicator technique, you see the indicator go down, you set the hook right away. You see a rise on this, set the hook right away. Now, some folks who are really advanced dry fly anglers will pause a second to let the fish commit to it. But if you haven't done a lot of this, you're already going to be behind the 8 ball on setting the hook. So set the hook as fast as you can see that rise, and you're going to be in the ball game at least 75% of the time for getting a good hook set. I tend to go quite quickly. I see that rise and I'm right away setting the hook. So this is the Euro-nymph or Euro setup, and it's awesome for picking apart little riffles like we have up here. Probably the most accurate way to get a drift, just you are limited in the kind of water you can fish. We're gonna change the fly though, because we want a really heavy fly on. We want to get direct contact, so we want to literally feel the depth of the water, and if the fly is too light and it's tumbling, which is actually what we want with an indicator setup, you're not going to be able to gauge that depth quite right. So heavy flies are key. Ones with very little profile as well, so that they can get through the water column quick. So something with a heavy bead and a reasonably slight profile. This one's been doing good for me this week. I'm tying a loop knot on this, lets it drift a little bit more free, bounce around a little bit more, but either an improved clinch or a non-slip loop knot is awesome. And then another thing that obviously all fishermen should have is going to be your forceps. Where are mine? There they are. So we obviously need to debarb all the hooks. These are great to get the hook out of the fish. Make sure you put it somewhere where you can get to it really easily, because when you're dealing with a fish that's badly hooked, you want to do that really quickly. But there we go, I think we're ready. So now we're gonna pick the water, and big, deep, tanky stuff isn't where this presentation shines. I usually like it in reasonably fast moving current with some boulders and some bounce to the water. The head end of this riffle is absolutely textbook for it. Work your way in, don't go too far. But you are going to have to get into the water with this setup, and we're going to peel off about 15, 16 feet of line max, and it's just a very loopy throw, and then we're going to go high with the rod, and we're going to use that sighter to gauge the depth, and you're going to see it bouncing along the bottom there, and we're just going to hold it up so it's right in the zone, and we're watching that sighter to hesitate or move. And then we're going to drop our rod down here as things swing out, and then we're done. Now I'm going to move a little bit farther in here, flip again, and up we come. I'm just gauging the depth, dropping it into that hole a little bit. Now, you gotta fish a little slower with this method, because you're really just picking apart the seams, but it makes for a perfect drift. Now you can see this sighter material that we have on. I know that below that I've got 3 feet, and then I know the top of the sighter is about 4.5, and so I'm just working that depth. You can see I just have a little bit of that sighter out, waiting for a hesitation. set on anything. That was just a slight pause or hesitation. Probably a rock I caught, but that's what we want to see. We want it right close to the bottom. Oh, that might have been a bite. Try that one again. Now, I'm going to work this entire run that way. We don't want to stand in one spot, but we do have to commit a little bit more time to each little area. And then I'm kind of limited on the distance that I can throw. So I've covered this inside seam. Now, if I went through this entire run with the Euro, I might say, hey, there's going to be fish in here. I'm going to come back with the indicator rig because then I can reach farther out. So let's show you that.
Right.
So I still do a lot of classic indicator fishing. I like seeing the float go down or the bobber go down, but this setup is going to allow me to cover a little bit farther. And it's also a little more versatile because it's a fly line on it. So if you guys or girls were just bringing one rod, you can do this setup with the same setup that you're going to dry fly fish. But if you were getting specific, we've got a slightly heavier line, at least has a heavier front taper. I have a Rio indicator leader here, and then I'm going to have 4x fluorocarbon off of that to a tippet ring, a split shot just above the tippet ring, and then we're going to run 5x in this river. If I'm in a river with bigger fish, I might run 4x, but it's going to cover bases. And then we got that Oros indicator that we talked about up at the top. And with this, I can cover almost all of this run, even though the drift is not as nice or perfect as the Euro setup. So we're going to set our indicator depth, and the general rule of thumb is we go a third more than the depth that we're fishing, because this is not going to be straight to the bottom. It's going to tumble and move with the currents. So I'm going to run probably, we're going to go a little higher than that. So we've got about 7 feet under our indicator, maybe 8. And we're going to work out to the seam and see if we can get one. Again, we're going to start short. Make sure there's not a fish in front of us right there. Now with this, we're going to have to mend, and we're going to get our rod as high as we can to get as much line off the water. And we're going to work back and forth just to get that indicator moving as though it's not attached to anything. And that was probably bottom, but we saw the indicator go down. There it is again. You can see it going away. That's bottom. So I know now where my depth is if I don't have a complete train wreck. We're going to work out a little farther. That touched bottom there. You can see the indicator tweaking a little bit out and away. That's just bottom. I'm going to go a little farther. Now we're going to dump some line onto the water there, let it extend, dump some line, and now we're going to move a little bit further into the run. Farther you get out, the more mending you're going to have to do. That's drifting pretty nice. I'm going to do a little check mend here just to make sure everything's going well. I'm going to load a dump mend. You can see this line, and then I'm going to flip that loop out to it to give it some slack at the indicator. And I'm just going to follow that down. And you can see I can cover right out to that seam, which I could never do with the Euro rig, but obviously we haven't got a fish here. It's a little early. They might not have turned on yet. Little mend there, load my dump mend, flip the slack line, load the dump mend, flip the slack line, and then we'll flip it all. I'm going to do one more, and then I would move. I'm going to move 6-8 feet downstream, repeat the process. No luck. Okay, so that's the nymphing rig. I could fish this all the way down. This water is actually probably a little bit too tanky. If you look at it, it's deep. It's not ideal for both the Euro and this, but what it is ideal for is the Swung Fly. So we're gonna grab the sink tip rod. I'm gonna start at the top, and just like we're steelhead fishing, we're gonna work through this run with the Swung Fly. So we've got a deep run. It's probably got some fish holding in the middle. They're not really feeding yet or rising and moving up into the top of the run. We're early in the day. I'm expecting that to happen more sort of 10 onwards. But let's try swinging a streamer through it. And this is classic. West Coast guys and girls know this already, but we're gonna start way at the top. We're going to cast, we're going to let it swing across the current, orientating it so the fly has got its head into the current, not sweeping with its head down into the current. So I've got my sink tip set up. I've got my 6-weight rod. It's got a little more beef. Maybe we run into a bull trout here, and it's going to be able to throw slightly bigger flies. You don't want to be trying to do this on a 3-weight. Oh, there was a rise up there. We'll dry fly that. So I'm gonna peel off a reasonable amount of line. I'm gonna do a short cast, a medium cast, a long cast, and then I'm probably just gonna stick with the long cast as I work through the run. Got a little bit of back cast issue here, but not a big deal. I'm gonna cast dead cross stream or just a touch downstream. I'm gonna make a mend right off the hop to orientate everything. I'm gonna trigger finger on, and then I'm just gonna let it slide. I'm gonna keep my rod tip about 6 inches off the water. That gives me a little bit of a shock absorber. And then if that line stalls out and stops swinging, I'm gonna start adding a little strip into it to pop that back up the edge. Now that was a short cast to start. I'm gonna go a little longer cast standing in the same spot. Big mend, trigger finger on, let it slide. Lowering the rod as I come in here to that nice 6-inch off the water zone. Now you can see my line stalling out a bit, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of a tweak to it to keep that fly moving at a speed that, you know, a prey species would be running away at. If it's too slow, we're not gonna entice that bite. Okay, now that I've done that, the key part of this presentation is to move. And so I'm comfortable with this run. I know I can cover it well. I'm gonna take 3 good, generous steps downstream, and then I'm gonna rinse and repeat. I gotta go a little more upstream because I got a tree on the side, or tree in front of us here. I'd normally be casting a little bit more there, but there's my mend, and I'm gonna follow it in, dropping the rod tip as I come through. Come on, Minnow, get us a bite here. And there it stalls out, pop, pop, pop. I'm not gonna retrieve it all the way. I'm just gonna get it sort of out of the gut of the run, and then I'm gonna take my steps. 2, 3, and rinse and repeat. There he is. What is it? This is a bull trout, I think. Feels like he's lunking down. This is probably a decent fish. He's not waking up on me, but he's big. This may take a while. Definitely a bull trout. You can feel it just lunking around. They don't fight as fun as rainbows, but they do pull darn hard. Now, one thing you might have noticed is I'm not just pulling straight up and down on this fish. I'm getting consistent, firm side pressure. That's going to direct his head in the area that I want him. You'll find that the fish will pull in the opposite direction that you're applying pressure to. So you see he's going out into the river now. I'm going to want to bring him up a little bit, so I'm just going to casually switch over here, put some up pressure on him. He'll start pulling the other way, and then I can probably, if I get some line on him here, I can turn him around by coming back towards you guys this way. And that should turn his head or have him push out. Yeah, there it comes. Now, of course, my net's over on shore. I usually have my pack on me so I can just reach around and grab my net. So we'll see what we can do with this. Oh, cameraman's got a net. That's good. Oh, this guy's not done yet. We're going to be here a while. Thank you. Ah, he's not that big. Well, I want him not to be turning away from me. So every time I do one of these changes, I'm going to change this way. I call it walking the dog, and then we're going to bring him back the other way. If I can direct his head at will, and he doesn't start pulling against the direction that I'm doing, I know we're getting close. Take your time in here. Like there, he's pretty close there. We'll probably have a couple more little goes, and then we'll get him. Come on, buddy. Or not. You can see trying to do this with a 3-weight, not that you couldn't do it, would be a challenge. Very strong, these fish. Come on, buddy. We're almost done here. I'm going to try not to choke up into my leader just because you lose a lot of fish at this distance because you go so short on them that you don't have the shock absorption. Oh, there's a rainbow rising. Or maybe he was running away from the bull trout. Yeah, this is there's a special holding device called your butt. All right, I think we're close here. Yeah, there we go. Oh, and the fly came out. So that's perfect. So here we go. This is a classic BC bull trout. And that was on our little egg-sucking leech. So here he is. Nice little bull trout. They get a lot bigger than this. This is a decent one. And they're obviously not focused on being bug eaters. They're gonna like chasing down minnow imitations, sculpin imitations. That was a classic egg-sucking leech that worked, but let's get him back in the water here. Thanks, buddy. So that's the Swung Fly. Super productive, easy to cover lots of water. Usually gets you a bite or two. All right, so those are specific setups to do the specific techniques. I know most of you may not want to carry 4 rods. Sometimes I don't. I want to go light. I want to have just one rod to do it all. Or you don't have multiple rods. So I'm going to go back to the studio and I'm going to show you guys and girls simple ways to take one rod, do a swung fly, do nymphing, do dry fly, all on the one setup. You just have to do a little bit more work to change between them when you're out on the river and nature tells you to try a different technique. All right, guys, I didn't make it to the studio, but I wanted to make sure I showed you how we can set up this system so you can run one rod and all the different techniques. And so what you want to do is you want to grab a 9-foot tapered leader. 5X is perfect if you're running a 4-weight or a 5-weight rod. I would say that's the ideal weight to be running one rod on the trout streams. And then all we're going to do is we're going to put 5X mono tippet on it, something like the Rio Power Flex here we got. Works perfectly, and we're going to do about 18 inches of that. That way I can stick a split shot, something like this guy here, the Raven Soft is perfect. And it's going to allow us to nymph. Now we can rip that off and we can throw on a dry fly, throw on our gink, and we're in the game for that. But what would happen if you wanted to run a sink tip? And I highly recommend putting one of these guys in your top pocket. Now this is a Versa leader. It's not going to add too much weight to your floating line, so it's still going to cast well. And we just loop that onto the floating line. And then we run our breast to hand like we did before of maybe 3X or 2X. And all of a sudden we've got a quick sink tip. Now I love carrying that in my top pocket because I might be hiking the river and all of a sudden I see a bull trout down in a deep pool and I can make that switch reasonably quickly. I hope that walks you guys and girls through it, how you can take one rod, set up, do all these presentations. Maybe you can start adding one extra rod into the mix that's set up for a specific presentation. But I hope you enjoyed seeing that, seeing the different ways we can present a fly. And we're gonna put some videos up here where we go over some of the leader setups specifically for these guys in a little more detail. And as always, if you wanna see more videos like this, consider hitting the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one.